We moved into the old Victorian house a month ago. My parents and they adored the place. The high ceilings, the intricate woodwork, the sense of history embedded in every corner. But from the moment we stepped inside, I felt an unease that I couldn't shake. It was as if the house itself was watching me, and nothing unnerved me more than the painting on the second floor. It was a portrait of a woman with hollow eyes and a thin, unsettling smile. Her dark, piercing gaze seemed to follow me whenever I walked past. The painting hung in the hallway leading to my room, and no matter how much I begged my parents to get rid of it, they insisted it was a valuable antique. "It's part of the house's charm," my mom said, patting my head. "You'll get used to it." But I never did. The woman in the painting haunted my thoughts, her eyes a constant reminder of something lurking just out of sight. One evening, my parents went to visit friends, promising to be back by 11 p.m. They assured me I'd be fine alone. After all, I had just turned 12. They left with a reminder: don't open the door for anyone. I settled in front of the TV to watch my favorite cartoons, trying to ignore the creeping sense of dread. The house was unusually silent, each creak and groan amplified in the empty rooms. Then, from the second floor, I heard a soft creak. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. My eyes were drawn to the painting, now hanging slightly askew. Goosebumps prickled my skin as it seemed the woman's gaze had shifted along with the tilt. Trying to shake off my fear, I returned to my cartoons. But then, a loud crash echoed through the house. My heart pounded as I stood frozen. The painting had fallen. A voice inside my head warned me, "Don't go. It's just like in horror movies." But I tried to rationalize it away. It was only a painting, after all. Slowly, I crept up the stairs, the old wood groaning under my weight. I reached the hallway and saw the painting lying face down on the floor. The air felt colder, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I bent down to pick up the painting, intending to hang it back up. But as I lifted it, my breath caught in my throat. The woman was gone. Her image had vanished, leaving an empty canvas. I dropped the painting and bolted downstairs, my pulse roaring in my ears. I ran outside, shivering in the chilly night air, and waited for my parents. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound magnified by my fear. Then, I saw her, a silhouette in my bedroom window, staring down at me with those empty, haunting eyes. She lingered for 3 seconds before fading into the darkness. When my parents finally returned, I was hysterical, babbling about the woman in the painting. They tried to calm me, but their disbelief was palpable. My dad went upstairs and returned, saying the painting was back on the wall, just as it had been. I insisted it had fallen and the woman had disappeared, but they shook their heads. "You're just letting your imagination run wild," my mom said gently. "But if it makes you feel better, we'll get rid of the painting." They threw it away, and with it, some of my fear. But the memory of that night never left me. The house felt different afterward, less oppressive, but I still felt uneasy whenever I walked past that spot. Years later, I sometimes wonder about the woman in the painting. Was she a restless spirit, trapped within the house's walls? Or was it the house itself, using the painting as a way to reach out and interact with the living? I'll never know for sure, but one thing is certain. That house was more than just wood and stone. It was alive in its own way, watching, waiting, and sometimes, interacting with those who dared to live within its walls. Even now, the fear lingers, a reminder that some places are not just haunted by ghosts, but by the very essence of their past. The night sky bore down with a pale, bloody hue, casting an eerie glow over everything and banishing any remnants of good mood. Not that I had much to begin with. My mom was admitted to the hospital earlier that day, and the past 24 hours had stretched into an eternity. Though only 15, I felt certain that her sudden hospitalization was due to the doctor's negligence. A few days ago, she'd had dental surgery, and afterward, her smooth face had swelled grotesquely, and her condition had worsened. Big men in uniforms had stomped around our house, eventually taking Mom away. I never saw her again. I was terrified. My father tried to mask his worries, but the way he paced the rooms, his heart pounding like a drum, seemed to reverberate through the entire neighborhood. He nodded affirmatively at my questions, desperately trying to convince me not to worry about Mom. But with each ringing phone call, his eyes grew dimmer, and his face turned a shade whiter. There was no way I was going to find out anything that night. I needed to sleep, but fear gripped me. The next day dragged on even longer. They had taken my mom to the emergency room. I couldn't understand what was happening, and confusion clouded my thoughts. By evening, the house had quieted, but still, there were no calls. A heavy, inexplicable silence settled over our room. My father jumped up suddenly, offering tea and turning on the old TV. Fat faces rambled across the flat screen, spouting adult nonsense. I flinched at the kettle's whistle, and my father's shadow flitted across the room. The hot tea did nothing to quell the chill that had settled within me. I wrapped myself in a blanket, but the shivering didn't stop. We left the dishes on the table and sat in silence, staring at the TV, both holding onto the hope of Mom's swift recovery. Then, the mug on the table moved. It spun slightly on its axis and shifted closer to the neighboring dish. For a moment, we were paralyzed. Our pale faces turned towards each other, eyes wide with questioning fear. "Did you see that?" my father whispered. "Yes," I replied, my voice dry and cracked with fear. The silence resumed, but the mug remained still. The fear in the room thickened, an unseen presence gnawing at the edges of our sanity. That night, I decided to sleep on the couch. Dread clung to me like a second skin. I closed my eyes for a moment, and the room seemed to dissolve into a fog. In this dream, or was it reality, a dead wind prowled along the bare walls. But where was my father? The floor was torn up, holes and rotted wood scattered everywhere. A long extinguished light bulb hung crookedly from a charred string. The emptiness was palpable, filled with an unnerving presence. The whistle of a draft beckoned me forward. The room's door, mangled but still standing, shivered in the breeze. The living room, once the heart of our home, had become a wasteland. Shattered glass panes trembled as if alive. Torn wallpaper flapped convulsively. "Kid," a voice, distant yet urgent, called out. I couldn't pinpoint its source. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the origin of the noise. "Daddy," the voice was insistent, demanding. It sought attention, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. White with fear, I raised my head and stared out the broken window. Not long ago, a TV cable had dangled there, but now something moved on that cable. It was a person. The violent gusts made the cable sway, banging against the house, causing it to shudder involuntarily. The silhouette no longer called out. It seemed satisfied that I had noticed it. Holding my breath, I watched the figure climbing along the windows of my apartment. Dark hands gripped the ledge, nails scratching as the stranger began to pull himself through the window. Fear seized me, a gunshot fear that pierced deep. The man climbed closer, an unknown creature invading my home, my former home. I shuddered awake. It was just a dream. The next day, the clinic called. Mom was on the mend. A week later, she returned home. The mysterious visitor never reappeared, and the dishes never moved on their own again. Had the presence been trying to protect me, or was it something more sinister? The fear from that night stayed with me, a haunting reminder that some forces are beyond understanding, lurking just at the edge of reality.